She walked alone across the burning desert where the sun pressed down like a living weight and every breath felt borrowed from a cruel sky. The sand stretched endlessly with no shelter, no mercy, and no promise except survival or death before nightfall. Her boots were torn, her water nearly gone, and her shadow followed her like a thin reminder that she still existed. Story said no one crossed this land alone and returned, but she had no choice and no fear left to lose. As the wind shifted, she felt her before she saw a presence heavy and ancient watching from beyond the dunes. The sand trembled softly, and a shape rose against the horizon larger than any creature she had known. A giant wolf emerged, its fur the color of storm clouds, its eyes burning like twin embers in the heat. It stood taller than a horse, its breath steaming despite the sun, and the air seemed to bow around it. She stopped walking because running would be useless and screaming would waste breath. Her hand closed around the worn blade at her side, knowing it was small and knowing it was all she had. The wolf stepped closer, each movement slow, deliberate, as if the desert itself guided its steps. Its paws sank into the sand, leaving deep marks like scars across the earth. Legends whispered that such beasts were guardians of forgotten realms, spirits bound to test the living. She remembered those stories now and wondered if this was a final trial. The wolf lowered its head and growled a sound that vibrated through her bones and into her heart. Yet it did not leap and it did not attack, and that alone was strange. She raised her blade not in challenge but in instinct, her arm trembling not from fear but exhaustion. The heat blurred her vision, and for a moment the wolf seemed to multiply, then settle back into one towering form. Her knees weakened and she nearly fell, yet she forced herself to stand because surrender felt worse than death. The wolf watched silently as if measuring something unseen. Time stretched long and thin like the desert horizon. Then the wolf did something no tale had ever described. It stepped back and sat upon the sand, lowering its massive body with calm dignity. Its eyes softened and the growl faded into a low breath like a sigh. She stared, unable to move, unsure if this was a trick or a miracle. Slowly the wolf turned its head and looked toward the west where the sun leaned closer to rest. It rose again and began to walk not away but beside her, matching her pace as if inviting her forward. Every instinct screamed danger, yet something deeper urged trust. She took one step then another, and the wolf stayed near, silent sentinel. The desert seemed less hostile with its presence, as if the wind itself feared to challenge a beast. When her strength faltered, the wolf slowed, and when she stumbled it nudged her gently upright. No words passed between them, yet understanding grew with every step. As night crept and the temperature dropped sharply and darkness threatened to swallow the dunes, the wolf stopped beside a tall rock formation and began to dig with powerful strokes. Within moments it uncovered a hidden spring, cool water spilling into sand. She fell to her knees, drinking deeper, tears mixing with the water she thought she would never taste again. The wolf lay nearby, watching the stars appear one by one above the endless sky. She rested against a stone, her body shaking from relief and disbelief. In the quiet she felt smaller than ever, yet safer than she had felt in years. The beast that should have ended her life had instead guarded it. When dawn arrived, the wolf stood and faced her once more. Its eyes met hers, and in them she saw neither hunger nor rage, but something like respect. It bowed its head slightly, then turned and walked back into the dunes, fading into legend once more. She continued her journey, chained forever, carrying a story no one would believe. And when she reached the edge of the desert and told what had happened, people laughed and shook their heads. Yet sometimes at night, when the wind howled softly across the sands, travelers swore they saw a great shadow watching over the lost. A giant wolf standing between death and those brave enough to walk alone. Waiting not to destroy, but to protect those who face the desert with courage, she walked onward after the wolf vanished, and the desert felt different, as if it remembered her steps. The sand no longer burned her feet, the wind no longer cut her skin, and the silence no longer felt empty. Every dune seemed to whisper of ancient watchers, and unseen powers meant only for those who endured. She carried no proof, yet her heart carried the weight of truth. As the sun climbed higher, she noticed marks in the sand beside her larger than any animal should leave. They appeared, then faded, as if the desert itself chose when they could be seen. She understood then that the wolf had not truly left, and that comfort steadied her stride. Hunger still gnawed at her, but fear had loosened its grip. By midday, she reached the ruins of stone pillars half buried and cracked by time. Travelers spoke of this place as cursed, yet she felt only calm within its broken circle. She rested there feeling watched, not threatened, but guarded by something vast and patient. The desert wind hummed low like a distant breath. Memories of her past surfaced as she rested, memories of flight, of loss of a life left behind. She had crossed into the desert to escape chains unseen yet heavy. Now she realized she was no longer running, but being guided towards something new. The thought filled her with quiet resolve. When she rose to leave, she found fresh water pooled among the stones untouched by the sun. She drank again, whispering thanks to no one and everyone. Her journey continued through valleys of sand where shadows moved strangely at the edge of sight. Each night she dreamed of silver eyes watching from beyond the firelight. Days passed and wordless strength returned to her limbs. She no longer feared the dark nor the vastness ahead. On the fourth night she heard a distant howl, not menacing but reassuring, echoing across the dunes. She smiled, knowing she was not alone. At the edge of the desert a settlement emerged, small and wary. The people stared at her with disbelief because no one arrived from that direction alive. They asked how she survived, and she spoke of heat and thirst and will. She did not speak of the wolf because some truths live best unchallenged. Yet children pointed to the horizon, claiming a giant shadow watched the village at dusk. Elders pretended not to hear, but their prayers grew quieter and more respectful. She stayed only one night, then continued her path into greener lands. Her purpose now clearer than ever. Years later, songs spread of a guardian wolf spirit who judged hearts, not strength. Warriors sought it and were never seen again, while the humble sometimes returned changed. She heard these stories and knew why the wolf chose silence over fame. Protection required mystery, not worship. One evening, while traveling through another harsh land, she sensed the same presence once more. The air grew still and the stars burned brighter. She did not turn and she did not call out because she did not need to. She walked forward knowing the path was watched. And somewhere beyond sight a giant wolf paced the night. Not as a beast, not as a god, but as a keeper of balance. Waiting for the next soul brave enough to face the desert alone. Ready not to shock the world, but to quietly save it again.